welcome back. We're up to Book 12 in the Sermons of Peter. So without further delay, we'll go ahead and get started. Therefore, from Tripolis of Phoenicia to go to Antioch of Syria, on the same day we came to Ortosius and stayed there. And on account of its being near the city which we had left, almost all having heard the preaching before, we stopped there only one day and then set out to Antaradus. And as there were many who journeyed with us, Peter, addressing Nicetas and Aquila, said, Inasmuch as the great crowd of those who journeyed with us draws upon us no little envy as we enter city after city, I have thought that we must of necessity arrange so that neither on the one hand these may be grieved at being prevented from accompanying us, nor on the other hand we, by being so conspicuous, may fall under the envy of wickedness. Wherefore I wish you, Nicetas and Aquila, to go before me in two separate bodies, and to enter secretly into the Gentile cities. I know indeed that you are distressed at being told to do this, being separated from me by a space of 2 days. I would have you know, therefore, that we the persuaders, love you, the persuaded, much more than you love us who have persuaded you. Therefore, loving one another as we do, by not unreasonably doing what we wish, let us provide as much as in us lies for safety. For I prefer, as you also know, to go into the more notable cities of the provinces and to remain some days and discourse, and for the present lead the way into the neighboring Laodicea. And after 2 or 3 days, so far as it depends upon my choice, I shall overtake you. And on account of the confusion, you alone shall receive me at the gates, so that we may enter along with you without commotion. And thence, in like manner, after some days' stay, others in your stead will go forward by turns to the places beyond prepared lodgings for us. When Peter had thus spoken, they were compelled to acquiesce, saying, It does not altogether grieve us, my master, to do this on account of its being your command. In the first place, indeed, because you have been chosen by the providence of God as being worthy to think and counsel well in all things. And in addition to this, for the most part, we shall be separated from you for only 2 days by the necessity of preceding you. And that were indeed a long time to be without sight of you, O Peter, did we not consider that they will be more grieved who are sent much farther forward, being ordered to wait for you longer every day, distressed that they are longer deprived of the sight of your longed-for countenance. And we, though not less distressed than they, make no opposition, because you order us to do it for profit. Thus having spoken, they went forward, having it in charge that at the first stage they should address the accompanying multitude, that they should enter the cities apart from one another. When therefore they had gone, I, Clement, rejoiced greatly that he had ordered me to remain with himself. Then I answered and said, I thank God that you have not sent me away as you have done the others, as I should have died of grief. But he said, But what? If there shall ever be any necessity that you be sent away for the sake of teaching, would you, on account of being separated for a little while from me, and that for an advantageous purpose, would you die for that? Would you not rather impress upon yourself the duty of bearing the things that are arranged for you through necessity, and cheerfully submit? And do you not know that friends are present with one another in their memories, although they are separated bodily? Whereas some, being bodily present, wander from their friends in their souls by reason of want of memory. Then I answered, Do not think, my master, that I should endeavor the grief foolishly, but with some good reason. For since I hold you, my master, in place of all, father, mother, brothers, relatives, you who are the means through God of my having the saving truth, holding you in place of all, I have the greatest consolation. And in addition to this, being afraid of my natural youthful lust, I was concerned lest, being left off by you, being but a young man, and having now such a resolution that it would be impossible to desert you without incurring the anger of God, I should be overcome by lust. But since it is much better and safer for me to remain with you, when my mind is with good reason set upon venerating, therefore I pray that I may always remain with you. Moreover, I remember you saying in Caesarea, If anyone wishes to journey with me, let him piously journey. And by piously you meant that those who are devoted to the worship of God should grieve no one in respect of God, such as leaving parents, an attached wife, or any others, whence I am in all respects a fitting fellow traveler for you, to whom, if you would confer the greatest favor, you would allow to perform the functions of a servant. Then Peter, hearing, smiled and said, What think you then, O Clement? Do you not think that you are placed by very necessity in the position of my servant? For who else shall take care of those many splendid tunics, with all my changes of rings and sandals, and who shall make ready those pleasant and artistic dainties, which, being so various, need many skillful cooks, and all those things which are procured with great eagerness, and are prepared for the appetite of effeminate men, as for some great wild beast? However, such a choice has occurred to you, perhaps without you understanding or knowing my manner of life, that I use only bread and olives, and rarely pot herbs, and that is my only coat and cloak which I wear, and I have no need of any of them, nor of anything else, for even in these I abound. For my mind, seeing all the eternal good things that are there, regard none of the things that are here. However, I accept of your goodwill, and I admire and commend you, for that you, a man of refined habits, have so easily submitted your manner of living to your necessities. For we, from our childhood, both I and Andrew, my brother, who is also my brother as respects God, not only being brought up in the condition of orphans, but also accustomed to labor through poverty and misfortune, easily bear the discomforts of our present journeys. Whence, if you would obey me, you would allow me, working man, to fulfill the part of a servant to you. But when I heard this, fell a trembling and weeping, that such a word should be spoken by a man to whom all the men of this generation are inferior in point of knowledge and piety. But he, seeing me weeping, asked the cause of my tears. Then I said, In what way have I sinned, so that you have spoken to me in such a word? Peter answered, If it were wrong of me to speak of being your servant, you were first in fault for asking to be mine. Then I said, The cases are not parallel, for to do this indeed becomes me well, but it is terrible for you, the herald of God, and who saves our souls, to do this to me. Then Peter answered, I should agree with you, but that our Master, who came for the salvation of the world, being alone noble above all, submitted to the condition of a servant, that he might persuade us not to be ashamed to perform the ministrations of servants to our brethren, however well born we may be. Then I said, If I think to overcome you in argument, I am foolish. However, I thank the providence of God that I have been thought worthy to have you instead of parents. Then Peter inquired, Are you really then alone in your family? And I answered, There are indeed many and great men, being of the kindred of Caesar, wherefore Caesar himself gave a wife of his own family to my father, who was his foster brother. And of her 3 sons of us were born, 2 before me, who were twins, and very like each other, as my father told me, but I scarcely know either of them or our mother, but bear about with me an obscure image of them as through dreams. My mother's name was Methidia, and my father's Faustus, and of my brothers one was called Faustinus, and the other one Faustinanius. Then after I, their 3rd son, was born, my mother saw a vision, so my father told me, which told her that unless she immediately took away her 2 sons and left the city of Rome for exile for 12 years, she and they must die by an all-destructive fate. Therefore my father, being fond of his children, supplying them suitably for the journey with male and female servants, put them on board ship, and sent them to Athens with her to be educated, and kept me alone of his sons with him for his comfort. And for this I'm very thankful that the vision had not ordered me to depart with my mother from the city of Rome. Then after the lapse of a year, my father sent money to them to Athens, and at the same time to learn how they did, but those who went on this errand did not return. And in the 3rd year, my father, being distressed, sent others in like manner with supplies, and they returned in the 4th year with the tidings that they had seen neither my mother nor my brothers, nor had they ever arrived at Athens, nor had they found any trace of any of those who set out with them. Then my father, hearing this, and being stunned with excessive grief, and not knowing where to go in quest of them, used to take me with him and go down to the harbor and inquire of many where any one of them had seen or heard of a shipwreck 4 years ago, and one turned one place and another. Then he inquired whether they had seen the body of a woman with 2 children cast ashore. And when they told him they had seen many corpses in many places, my father groaned at the information. But with his bowels yearning, he asked the unreasonable questions that he might try to search so great an extent of sea. However, he was pardonable, because through affection toward those whom he was seeking for, he fed on vain hopes. And at last, placing me under guardians and leaving me for Rome when I was 12 years old, he himself weeping went down to the harbor, went on board ship, and set out upon the search. And from that day till this I have neither received a letter from him, nor do I know whether he be alive or dead, but rather suspect that he is dead somewhere, either overcome by grief or perished by shipwreck. And the proof of that is that it is now the 20th year since that I have heard no true intelligence concerning him. But Peter, hearing this, wept through sympathy, and immediately said to the gentlemen who were present, if any worshiper of God has suffered these things, such as this man's father has suffered, he would immediately have assigned the cause of it to be his worship of God, and ascribing it to the wicked one. Thus also is the lot of the wretched Gentiles to suffer, and we worshippers of God know it not. But with good reason I call them wretched, because here they are ensnared, and the hope that is thine they obtain not. For those who in the worship of God suffer afflictions, suffer them for the expiation of their transgressions. When Peter has spoken thus, a certain one amongst us ventured to invite him, in the name of all, that next day early in the morning, that he should sail to Aradus, an island opposite, distant, I suppose, not quite 30 stadia, for the purpose of seeing 2 pillars of vinewood that were there, and that were very great girth. Therefore the indulgent Peter consented, saying, when you leave the boat, do not go many of you together to see the things that you desire to see, for I do not wish that the attention of the inhabitants should be turned to you. And so we sailed, and in a short time arrived at the island. Then landing from the boat, we went to the place where the vinewood pillars were, and along with them we looked at several of the works of Phidias. But Peter alone did not think it worthwhile to look at the sights that were there, but noticing a certain woman sitting outside before the doors, begging constantly for her support, he said to her, O woman, is any of your limbs defective that you should submit to such disgrace? I mean that of begging. And do not rather work with the hands which God has given you, and procure your daily food? But she, groaning, answered, would that I had hands able to work, but now they retain only the form of hands, being dead and rendered useless by my gnawing of them. Then Peter asked her, what is the cause of your suffering so terribly? And she answered, weakness of soul and nothing else. For if I had the mind of a man, there was a precipice or a pool whence I should have thrown myself, and have been able to rest from my tormenting misfortunes. Then said Peter, what then do you suppose, O woman, that those who destroy themselves are freed from punishment? Are not the souls of those who thus die punished with the worst punishment in Hades for their suicide? But she said, would that I were persuaded that the souls really found alive in Hades, then I should love death, making light of the punishment that I might see, were it but for an hour, my longed-for sons. Then said Peter, what is it that grieves you? I should like to know, O woman, for if you inform me in return for this favor, I shall satisfy you that souls live in Hades, and instead of precipice or pool, I shall give you a drug, that you may live and die without torment. Then the woman, not understanding what was spoken ambiguously, being pleased with the promise, began to speak to us. Were I to speak of my family and my country, I do not suppose that I should be able to persuade anyone. But of what consequence is it to you to learn this, excepting only the reason why my anguish I have deadened my hands by gnawing them? Yet I should give you an account of myself, so far as it is in your power to hear it. I, being very nobly born, by the arrangement of a certain man in authority, became the wife of a man who was related to him. And at first I had twin sons, and afterwards another son. But my husband's brother, being thoroughly mad and enamored of wretched me, who exceedingly affected chastity, And I, wishing neither to consent to my lover, nor to expose to my husband his brother's love of me, reasoned thus, that I may neither defile myself by the commission of adultery, nor disgrace my husband's bed, nor set brother at war against brother, nor subject the whole family, which is a great one, to the reproach of all. As I said, I reasoned that it was best for me to leave the city for some time with my twin children, until the impure love should cease of him who flattered me to my disgrace. The other son, however, I left with his father to remain for a comfort to him. However, that matters might be thus arranged, I resolved to fabricate a dream to the effect that someone stood by me at night and thus spoke, O woman, straightway leave the city with your twin sons or twin children for some time, until I shall charge you to return hither again. Otherwise, you forthwith shall die miserably with your husband and all of your children. And so I did. For as soon as I told the false dream to my husband, he being alarmed sent me off by ship to Athens with my 2 sons, and with slaves and maids and abundance of money, to educate the boys, until, said he, it shall please the giver of the oracle that you return to me. But wretch that I am, while sailing with my children, I was driven by the fury of the winds into these regions, and the ship having gone to pieces in the night, I was wrecked. And all the rest having died, my unfortunate self alone was tossed by a great wave and cast upon a rock. And while I sat upon it in my misery, I was prevented by the hope of finding my children alive from throwing myself into the deep then, when I could easily have done it, having my soul made drunk by the waves. But when the day dawned, I shouted aloud and howled miserably, and looked around, seeking for the dead bodies of my hapless children. Therefore the inhabitants took pity on me, and seeing me naked, they first clothed me, and then sounded the deep, seeking my children. And when they found nothing of what they sought, some of the hospitable women came to me to comfort me, and every one told her own misfortunes, that I might obtain comfort from the occurrences of similar misfortunes. But this only grieved me the more, for I said that I was not so wicked that I should take comfort from the misfortune of others. And so, when many of them asked me to accept their hospitality, a certain poor woman, with much urgency, constrained me to come into her cottage, saying to me, Take courage, woman, for my husband, who was a sailor, also died at sea, while he was still in the bloom of his youth, and ever since, though many have asked me in marriage, I have preferred living as a widow, regretting the loss of my husband. But we shall have in common whatever we can both earn with our hands. And not to lengthen out unnecessary details, I went to live with her on account of her love to her husband, and not long after my hands were debilitating by my gnawing on them. And the woman who had taken me in, being wholly seized by some malady, is confined to the house. Since then, the former compassion of the woman has declined, and I and the woman of the house are both of us helpless. For a long time I have sat here, as you see, begging, and whatever I get I convey to my fellow sufferer for our support. Let this suffice about my affairs. For the rest, what hinders you fulfilling of your promise to give me the drug, that I may give it to her also, who desires to die, and thus also, as you said, shall be able to escape from life. While the woman thus spoke, Peter seemed to be in suspense on account of many reasonings, but I came up and said, I have been going about seeking for you for a long time, and now what is in hand? But Peter ordered me to lead the way and wait for him on the boat. And because there was no gainsaying when he commanded, I did as I was ordered. But Peter, as he afterwards related to the whole matter to me, being struck in his heart with some slight suspicion, inquired of the woman, saying, Tell me, O woman, your family and your city, and the names of your children, and presently I shall give you the drug. But she, being put under constraint, and not wishing to speak, yet being eager to obtain the drug, cunningly said one thing for another. So she said that she was an Ephesian, and her husband a Sicilian, and like manner she changed the names of her 3 children. Then Peter, supposing that she spoke the truth, said, Alas, O woman, I thought that this day was to bring you great joy, suspecting that you are a certain person of whom I was thinking, and whose affairs I have heard and accurately know. But she adjured him, saying, Tell me, I entreat of you, that I may know if there is any among women any more wretched than myself. Then Peter, not knowing that she had spoken falsely, through pity towards her, began to tell the truth. There was a certain young man in attendance upon me, thirsting after the discourses on religion, a Roman citizen, who told me how that a father and 2 twin brothers he had lost sight of them all. For, says he, my mother and father related to me, having seen a vision, left the city of Rome for another time with her twin children, lest she should perish by an evil fate. And having gone away with them, she cannot be found, and her husband, the young man's father, having gone in search of her also, cannot be found. When Peter thus spoke, the woman who had listened attentively swooned away as if in a stupor. But Peter, approaching her, and caught hold of her, and exhorted her to remain herself, persuading her to confess what was the matter with her. And she, being powerless in the rest of her body as through intoxication, turned her head around, being able to sustain the greatness of the hope for joy. And rubbing her face, where, she said, is this youth? And he, now seeing through the whole affair, said, Tell me first, for otherwise you cannot see him. Then she earnestly said, I am the youth's mother. And Peter said, What is his name? And she said, Clement. Then Peter said, It is the same, and he it was that spoke to me a little while ago, whom I ordered to wait for me in the boat. And she, falling at Peter's feet, entreated him to make haste to come to the boat. Then Peter, If you would keep terms with me, I shall do so. Then she said, I will do anything, only show me my only child, for I shall seem to see in him my 2 children who died here. Then Peter said, Well, when you see him, be quiet until we depart from the island. And she said, I will. Peter therefore took her by the hand and led her to the boat. But when I saw him leading the woman by the hand, laughed, and approaching, offered to lead her instead of him to his honor. But as soon as I touched her hand, she gave a motherly shout and embraced me violently, and eagerly kissed me as her son. But I, being ignorant of the whole affair, shook her off as a mad woman, but through my respect for Peter, I checked myself. But Peter said, Alas, what are you doing, my son Clement, shaking off your real mother? But I, when I heard this, wept. And falling down by my mother, who had fallen, I kissed her, for as soon as this was told me, in some way I recalled her appearance indistinctly. Then great crowds ran together to see the beggar woman, telling one another that her son had recognized her, and that he was a man of consideration. Then, when we would have straightway left the island with my mother, she said to us, My much longed for son, it is right that I should bid farewell to the woman who entertained me, who, being poor and wholly debilitated, lies in the house. And Peter, hearing this, and all the multitude who stood by, admired the good disposition of the woman, and immediately Peter ordered some persons to go and bring the woman on her couch. And as soon as the couch was brought and set down, Peter said, in the hearing of the whole multitude, If I be a herald of the truth, in order that the faith of the bystanders, that they may know that there is one God who made the world, let her straightway rise whole. And while Peter was still speaking, the woman arose healed and fell down before Peter, and kissed her dear associate, and asked her what it all meant. Then she briefly detailed to her the whole business of the recognition, to the astonishment of the hearers. Then also my mother, seeing her hostess cured, entreated that she herself might also obtain healing, and his, placing his hand upon her, cured her also. Then Peter, having discoursed concerning God and the service accorded to him, he concluded as follows, If anyone wishes to learn these things accurately, let him come to Antioch, where I have resolved to remain for some length of time, and learn the things that pertain to his salvation. For if you are familiar with leaving your country for the sake of trading or of warfare and coming to far-off places, you should not be unwilling to go 3 days' journey for the sake of eternal salvation. Then after the address of Peter, I presented the woman who had been healed in the presence of all the multitude with 1,000 drachmas for her support, giving her in charge to a certain good man who was the chief man of the city, and who of his own accord joyfully undertook the charge. Further, having distributed the money amongst many other women, and thanked those who at any time had comforted my mother, I sailed away to Anteratus, along with my mother and Peter and the rest of our companions, and thus we proceeded to our lodging. And when we arrived, we had partaken of food and given thanks according to our custom. There being still time, I said to Peter, My master Peter, my mother has done a work of philanthropy in remembering the woman her hostess. And Peter answered, Have you indeed, O Clement, thought truly that your mother did a work of philanthropy in respect to her treatment of the woman who took her in after the shipwreck? Or have you spoken this word by way of greatly complimenting your mother? But if you spoke truly and not by way of a compliment, you seem to me to not know what the greatness of philanthropy is, which is affection toward anyone whatsoever in respect of his being a man, apart from physical persuasion. But not even do I venture to call the hostess who received your mother after her shipwreck philanthropic, for she was impelled by pity and persuaded to become the benefactress of a woman who had been shipwrecked, who was grieving for her children, a stranger, naked, destitute, and greatly deploring her misfortunes. When therefore she was in such circumstances, who that saw her, though he were impious, could but pity her. So that does not seem to me that even the stranger receiving woman did a work of philanthropy, but to have been moved to assist by pity for her innumerable misfortunes. And how much more is it true of your mother than when she was in prosperous circumstances and requited her hostess, she did a deed not of philanthropy but of friendship. For there is much difference between friendship and philanthropy, because friendship springs from reparation, but philanthropy, apart from physical persuasion, loves and benefits every man as he is a man. And therefore, while she pitied her hostess, she also pitied and did good to her enemies who had wronged her. She would be philanthropic. But if on one account she is friendly or hostile, and another account is hostile or friendly, such a one is the friend or enemy of some quality, not of man as man. Then I answered, do you not think then that even the stranger receiver was philanthropic, who did good to a stranger whom she did not know? Peter said, compassionate indeed I can call her, but I dare not call her philanthropic, just as I cannot call a mother philopedic, for she is prevailed on to have an affection for them by her pangs and her rearing of them. And the lover is also gratified by the company and enjoyment of his mistress, and the friend by return of friendship, and also the compassionate man by misfortune. However, the compassionate man is near to the philanthropic, in that he is impelled, apart from hunting after the receipt of anything, to do the kindness, but he is not yet philanthropic. Then I said, by what deeds then can anyone be philanthropic? And Peter answered, since I see that you are eager to hear what is the work of philanthropy, I shall not object to telling you. He is a philanthropic man who does good even to his enemies, and that it is so. Listen, philanthropy is a masculine, feminine, and the feminine part is called compassion, and the male part is named love to our neighbor. But every man is neighbor to every man, and not merely this man or that. For the good and the bad, the friend and the enemy, are alike men. It behooves therefore him who practices philanthropy to be an imitator of God, doing good to the just and the unjust, as God himself grants his sun and his heavens to all the present world. But if you will do good to the good, but not to the evil, or even will punish them, you undertake to do the work of a judge. You do not strive to hold by philanthropy. Then I said, then even God, who, as you teach us, is at some time to judge, is not philanthropic. Then said Peter, you assert a contradiction, for because he shall judge on that very account, he is philanthropic. For he who loves and compassionates upon those who have been wronged, avenges those who have wronged them. Then I said, if then I also do good and punish the wrongdoers in respect of their injuring men, am I not philanthropic? And Peter answered, if along with knowledge you had also authority to judge, you would do this rightly on account of you having received authority to judge those whom God made, and on account of your knowledge, infallibly justifying some as righteous and condemning some as unrighteous. Then I said, you have spoken rightly and truly, for it is impossible for anyone who has not knowledge to judge rightly. For sometimes some persons seem good, though they perpetuate wickedness in secret, and some good persons are conceived to be bad through the accusation of their enemies. But even if one judges having the power of torturing and examining, not even so should he altogether judge righteously. For some persons, being murderers, have sustained the tortures and have come off as innocent, while others, being innocent, have not been able to sustain the tortures, but have confessed falsely against themselves, and have been punished as guilty. Then said Peter, these things are ordinary. Now hear what is greater. There are some men whose sins or good deeds are partially their own, and partially those of others. But it is right that each one should be punished for his own sins and rewarded for his own merits. But it is impossible for anyone, except a prophet who alone has omniscience, to know with respect to the things that are done by anyone which are his own and which are not, for they are seen as done by him. Then I said, I would like to learn how some men's wrongdoings or right doings are their own, and some belong to others. Then Peter answered, the prophet of truth has said, good things must needs come, and blessed is he by whom they come. In like manner evil things must needs come, but woe to him through whom they come. But if evil things come by means of evil men, and good things are brought by evil men, it must needs be in each man as his own to be either good or bad, and proceeding from what he has proposed, in order that the coming of the subsequent good or evil, which being of his own choice are not arranged by the providence of God to come from him. This being so, it is the judgment of God that he who, as by a combat, comes through all misfortune and is found blameless, he is deemed worthy of eternal life. For those who by their own will continue in goodness are tempted by those who continue in evil by their own will, being persecuted, hated, slandered, plotted against, struck, cheated, accused, tortured, disgraced, suffering all these things by which it seems reasonable that they should be enraged and stirred up to vengeance. But the Master, knowing that those who wrongfully do these things are guilty by means of their former sins, and that the spirit of wickedness works these things by means of the guilty, has counseled to compassionate men as they are men, and being the instruments of wickedness through sin, and this counsel he has given to his disciples as claiming philanthropy, and as much as in us lies, to absolve the wrongdoer from condemnation, that is, as it were, the temperate may help the drunken by prayers, fasting, and benedictions, not resisting, not avenging, lest they should compel them to sin more. For when a person is condemned by anyone to suffer, it is not reasonable for him to be angry with him by whose means the suffering comes. For he ought to reason that if he had not ill used him, yet because he was to be ill used, he must have suffered it by means of another. Why then should I be angry with the dispenser, when I was condemned at all events to suffer? But yet further, if we do these same things to the evil on pretense of revenge, we who are good do the very things which the evil do, excepting that they do them first, and we second. And as I said, we ought not to be angry, as knowing that in the providence of God the evil punish the good. Those, therefore, who are bitter against their punishers sin, as disdaining the messengers of God, but those who honor them and set themselves in opposition to those who think to injure them are pious toward God, who has thus decreed. To this I answered, those therefore who do wrong are not guilty, because they wrong the just by the judgment of God. Then Peter said, they indeed sin greatly, for they have given themselves to sin. Wherefore, knowing this, God chooses from among them some to punish those who righteously repented of their former sins, that the evil things done by the just before their repentance may be remitted through this punishment. But to the wicked, who punish and desire to exploit them, and will not repent, it is permitted to exploit the just for the filling up of their own punishment. For without the will of Yahweh, not even a sparrow can fall into a snare. Thus even the hairs of the just are numbered by Yahweh. But he is just, who, for the sake of what is reasonable, fights with nature. For example, it is natural to all to love those who love them, but the just man tries also to love his enemies, and to bless those who slander him, and even to pray for his enemies, and to compassionate those who do him wrong. Wherefore also he refrains from doing wrong, and blesses those who curse him, and pardons those who strike him, and submits to those who persecute him, and salutes those who do not salute him, shares such things as he has with those who have not, persuades him that is angry with him, conciliates his enemy, exhorts the disobedient, instructs the unbelieving, comforts the mourner. Being distressed, he endures. Being ungratefully treated, he is not angry. But having devoted himself to love his neighbor as himself, he is not afraid of poverty, but becomes poor by sharing his possessions with those who have none. But neither does he punish the sinner, for he who loves his neighbor as himself, as he knows that when he has sinned he does not wish to be punished, so neither does he punish those who sin. And as he wishes to be praised and blessed and honored, and to have all his sins forgiven, thus he does to his neighbor, loving him as himself. In one word, what he wishes for himself, he wishes also for his neighbor, for this is the law of Yahweh and of the prophets. This is the doctrine of truth. And this perfect love toward every man is the male part of philanthropy, but the female part of it is compassion, that is, to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, take in the stranger, and show herself to and help to the utmost of her power him who is in prison, and in short, to have compassion on him who is in misfortune. But I, hearing this, said, These things indeed it is impossible to do, but to do good to enemies, bearing all their insolences, I do not think can possibly be in human nature. Then Peter answered, You have said truly, for philanthropy, being the cause of immortality, is given for much. Then I said, How then is it possible to get it in the mind? And Peter answered, O beloved Clement, the way to get it is this: if anyone be persuaded that the enemies, ill-using for a time those whom they hate, become the cause of them of deliverance from the eternal punishment, and forthwith he will ardently love them as benefactors. But the way to get it, O dear Clement, is but one, which is the fear of God. For he who fears God cannot indeed from the first love his neighbor as himself, for such an order does not occur to the soul. But by the fear of God he is able to do the things of those who love, and thus, while he does the deeds of love, the bride love is, as it were, brought to the bridegroom fear, and thus this bride, being forth philanthropic thoughts, makes her possessor immortal as an accurate image of God, which cannot be subject in its nature to corruption. Thus, while he expounded to us the doctrine of philanthropy, the evening having set in, we turned to sleep. Alright, that's the end of Book 12, and we will pick it up next time in Book 13. Shalom.